All right, welcome everybody. I believe we have a large group, so we're going to kick things off. Thanks to everyone for joining us today. We're really excited to have you all here today, and we have a pretty great presentation to walk through and a lot of great people to talk to today, so we're just going to kick things off. So today's conversation is design innovation for positive impact. So today we celebrate human-centered design and those making a positive change for the future. Today's event is co-sponsored by New York City by Design, Product Day, which we're celebrating today, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, who we're happy to have co-host with us, and Smart Design, who we represent, is excited to welcome our new neighbors, Farmshelf and Terraform. And today we're going to discuss how they're innovating for a new future, new technologies, and new habits. So from inclusive design to new forms of urban farming to reimagining the possibilities of architecture, this is a virtual smart salon. And today we're going to be highlighting how technology and design can make a positive change for tomorrow today. So with that, my name is Dan Grossman. I'm going to be hosting tonight. I'm the Director of Industrial Design at Smart Design here in New York City. And I'm really excited to be here with the group that you see in front of you. The panel today that's joining us is we have Tiffany Townsend, who is the SVP of External Affairs of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. John Anderson, Director of Technology, who's joining me from Smart Design. Andrew Scheer, founder and CEO of Farmshelf. And Maria Ayalova, co-founder of Terraform One. Thank you guys all for joining us today. Really excited to jump right in. Also, before we go any further, I really want to give a special thanks also to New York City by Design. It's a great organization. It's a really exciting week, and we're really happy to be here for Product Day. So thank you again for this opportunity on behalf of everyone here, Smart Design, Brooklyn Navy Yard, and the panelists. Very excited. With that said, I keep talking about the Brooklyn Navy Yard because at Smart Design we've moved. So you know, as we've turned the corner over 40 last year, we actually have spent the most of our time in Manhattan. We've actually recently relocated to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is really exciting. So the building you're seeing in front of you, Building 127, is our future home. So that's a big part of the reason we kicked this event off this year for Design Week with our new neighbors. And this is kind of like a get to know your neighbors moment. And we're really excited to be here. With that said, I'm going to pass this over really quickly to Tiffany, who can tell you a little bit more about the Brooklyn Navy Yard as well.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, everyone. As Dan said, I'm Tiffany Townsend. I'm the Senior Vice President for External Affairs here at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. So happy to see all of you out there in Zoom land this evening. For those of you who are not familiar with us, the Brooklyn Navy Yard we're a nonprofit, and we take the unusual form of being a 300-acre industrial park along the Brooklyn waterfront. And we, in that effort, we really focus on giving the manufacturing and industrial sectors a home here in New York City as a means to economic development, of helping businesses scale and grow faster than they otherwise would in a lot of other environments, and to help bridge New Yorkers by connecting them to jobs at the Navy Yard. We have more than 450 businesses that call the Navy Yard home, and that translates to over 11,000 people who work at the Navy Yard. And so we are very excited to have Smart Design at Building 127, which is one of our most recent, actually our last adaptive reuse projects. It's a really beautiful building, and anyone who wants to come visit the Navy Yard, I definitely welcome you to come by and see it. And really excited to have this opportunity to highlight some of our tenants, including Terraform One and Farmshelf, who are doing amazing work at the yard, both in their buildings and also dotted across the yard as well. Some really exciting work. So once again, thank you for the opportunity. Thanks to the folks at Smart Design for partnering up, and thanks to the folks at NYC by Design, because this is always a fun time of year for us. And for those of you who are interested either in visiting the yard, please check our website at brooklynnavyyard.org, or if you're interested in bringing your business to the yard and making the yard your home and joining our community, contact leasing at bnydc.org. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tiffany.
Dan, I'll kick it back to you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So just going to jump in. So yeah, as we mentioned, as I said, today is Innovating Today for Tomorrow, Design Innovation for a Positive Impact. And again, this is for New York City by Design Product Day. So as we started to really craft the theme of today and why we have the panelists joining us today, really thinking about products and what makes for a product. Because products come in all different shapes and sizes, right? And you can already, kind of get an idea of where this is going based on just understanding who some of our panelists are today. But, we're here really today to talk about products which are small, products which are medium, and products which are large. And we really wanted to create a diverse narrative for us to kind of go through to see different types of projects which are happening in different scales and how people around New York City, specifically in Brooklyn and the Navy Yard, are looking to tackle problems today to make the world a better place towards the future. So we're going to start off with small, and small for, small products. There's a lot of big opportunities there to make big impacts. And with that, Smart Design is going to kick things off, which I'll give a little quick intro to before I pass it over to John. So Smart Design is a strategic design company that helps people live better and work smarter. We are independently owned strategic design company, and we're known for our work in home, health, mobility, and many other sectors. We humanize product and services and experience through deep research, insights, and strategies. So again, we've been around for 40 years. We've done a lot of different work in different sectors. A lot of you probably know us for our work in OXO. That's kind of a big part of our history. But in reality, we've been, working in that, that relationship goes way beyond the peeler into all different types of products and categories. And we've been developing products with them for over 30 years. But, with products, we've also been working in different categories beyond housewares. So everything from mobility to health to different types of service and experience to the actual taxi cabs you ride in every day in here in New York City. We've been very fortunate to work in these different sectors. So product is very near and dear to our heart. And again, products come in all different shapes and sizes, be them digital or physical. But, one of the things we kind of like to say is that client projects, feed our business, but passion projects feed our soul. And for us, passion projects are a really big part of the type of work that we take on at Smart Design. The project you're seeing here is actually one with a partnership we did with Simprints, which is a nonprofit organization, which actually developed biometric scanners for community healthcare workers. So 2 billion people in the world lack formal ID necessary to access essential services like healthcare. We actually partnered with them to develop a system and create an experience which ensures medical interaction at a personal level. Again, these are the types of passion projects we really love. And, this is a larger scale initiative, but on an opposite side of the scale, we do a lot of work in inclusive design. And that's something we're going to talk about today, which is designing for one and how you can scale that up to help many. So with that, I'm going to pass this over now to John Anderson, our Director of Technology.
Thanks, Dan. You can actually keep it going. And take it over to me. So so we're going to take you through 2 case studies about designing for one, which we see as almost like the core of inclusive design, which is like really designing for people and with people. At first, we got like a couple upfront slides, but in the essence of time to get through this as quickly as possible, I'm just going to run through these first slides. So as designers, we're often told to not take things so personally. So not to get too emotional in things, and that we're actually designing for a lot of people and not necessarily get too emotional on one. Next slide. And then as engineers, as an engineer myself, I've often been told to develop things to scale. But what if I told you if I develop something statically, I could actually get a lot further and a lot faster because I didn't have to think about a lot of different other things. And so, and then within all of our projects, we're always designing these experiences, but using personas like mindful maven or pop savvy pioneer, and not necessarily really getting to know what those people are. And so what if we instead design those personas and then actually design them with real people? Now, it's really hard to do that, if you're trying to do it for 100 or 1,000 or whatever amount of people. But if you could do it just for one, how would you design that, and how would you make that a more emotional experience with them? So we're actually going to take you through 2 case studies where we experimented with this sort of idea of designing for one person. And so the first one is Project Susan. Next one. And so Susan has been living with MS for over 25 years. The disease has actually become so advanced where she can't walk, she can't eat herself, she can't even get out of bed. And so she has she has two nurses come four times a day that basically do things for her that we take for granted. It's actually, the condition has gotten so bad that if the nurses aren't there, simple actions like turning on the TV or answering a phone call, she no longer will do. And so we were actually partnered with the BBC to develop a product and service for Susan that would take a 4-person team for over 4 weeks. Now, the interesting piece about this was that it was partnered with this docuseries in England called The Big Life Fix, where it partners designers and engineers with people with accessibility needs. The thing that we were not used to, though, was there were basically filmers filming us this entire time. So if we messed up or we actually didn't do a good job, everything was pretty much being filmed at that time. So it added a ton of pressure on it. And so instead of actually going through just a deck, we actually created a 4-minute video that we're going to take you through right now.
There's all sorts of things that I can't do now because of the effects of the MS.
Susan has 2 carers that come in 4 times a day to do absolutely everything for her. She hasn't got the power to do anything for herself. They wash her, they dress her, they help feed her. To Susan, that's what the reality is. So if she thinks that she wants to reach out to her daughter because she's having a bad day, she can't do it. And it's hugely isolating for her.
The MS affects my eyesight, so now I cannot read. My hands shake constantly. I cannot get the words out that I know I want to say.
Most technology is designed for the masses. It's assuming a certain level of ability, and it means that a lot of people get excluded because if you've even got a mild impairment, you aren't going to be able to interface with technology in the same way that other people can.
At Smart, we strongly believe in the practice of inclusive design to design things that work better for a wider range of people and to really try and combat products that stigmatize certain groups of people.
When Smart Design got involved with BBC Two's Big Life Fix television series, we needed an entirely new approach to voice UI to create her very own voice-controlled assistant in the form of her favourite animal, an owl.
Okay, lovely Susan, what would you like to do?
Voice control is still in its infancy, and for users with accessibility needs, it can be rather frustrating and unhelpful. Susan's MS causes what she describes as foggy moments, where she cannot think of a word that she needs to say. But voice control technology currently demands that you say exactly what it wants to hear in a certain time.
So the design we created for Susan was, in layman's terms, a kind of accessibility jacket. It's like a wrapper around that core Amazon Alexa service, and it provides access to someone in Susan's position.
Alexa, open my special menu.
Okay, lovely Susan, what would you like to do?
The massive advantage of voice is it gets around her physical limitations. She doesn't have to press anything, she doesn't have to hold anything. But where it fails is in its ability to meet her cognitive needs.
People need a lot more than just the words you say. They need visual cues and gestures to help understand what's being said. But that's missing with a lot of these home hubs like Amazon and Google Home. So for Susan, we wanted to give her something which connected with her more emotionally. So we created an owl which was patient, it gave her time to think, and it allowed her to feel more connected to the technology.
The ultimate goal for the menu was to create a situation for Susan to lead her along the way. So for example, if she wants to listen to music, the beginning part of the navigation is, do you want to listen to something, watch something, or call someone?
Listen to something.
Okay, Yippee, let's listen to something. Pick what you would like to do. Music, books, radio.
We gave the ability for her to really just kind of give one-word answers, so she didn't really have to remember anything.
Music.
Yes, good idea. Some music would be nice. What shall we listen to? Last played. Genres. Surprise me. Do something else.
Genres.
Okay, pick your favorite. 60s. Musicals. Country.
60s.
Play 60s playlist.
Watching Susan interact with the menu for the first time and watching her giggle.
As soon as she started talking to the owl, you could see that the interactions changed completely. She was much more engaged, she was much happier.
The owl gives Susan the freedom that the rest of us enjoy without even thinking. She's now able to make a phone call or play music or change the channel on the TV.
Thank you, Alexa.
Anytime.
I love that video. Next slide, Dan. Great, thank you. So this is what we created for Susan. It's her very own smart hub, powered by Alexa with some, significant alterations. The first is we personalized the content for her. We created options that was just basically based on her lifestyle and what she would want to do. We also created a menu system that would help her guide her through the options and just basically verbally laying out not only where she's going and what she wants to do, but also where she's been, just so that she gets like a mental reference point. And then we also gave it a presence. Her favorite animal was an owl. And so for us to use what the visual cues are of the Alexa hub, of it glowing, so she knows when it's listening or talking, but then giving it the presence of an owl, so she developed an emotional connection, was actually quite lovely. We had a lot more ambitions for what we wanted to do, but within 4 weeks, I thought we hit this pretty well. So that's Project Susan, and then which leads us into the next project, which interestingly enough, they're both somewhat connected. While speaking about Project Susan, a company called Adaptive Design reached out about a potential collaboration. And they asked us to come by the studio and where they were doing a hack day for Morse code and people with severe accessibility needs. And I personally was just floored by it. And we then began discussing what potential partnerships can look like. I just want to give a little background about Adaptive. Adaptive Design is a New York City-based nonprofit that creates low-cost and no-cost custom adaptations for people with disabilities and accessibility needs. They've hosted several community events and virtual field trips over the past many months. They're currently in operation right now, even though it's virtually, and they've formed new community partnerships, groups like Makers Make Change, ED Snaps, Tom Global, amongst others. And so, which brings us to the project at hand. So after that first meeting, Adaptive reached out a few months later and came up with an interesting project. So this is Tamara. She actually works at Adaptive and is the first person I actually talked to at Smart Design. Similar to Susan, she had a unique challenge. Tamara has a disability that requires her to be in a wheelchair and is also dangerous for her to be bumped into. Which is pretty tricky in New York City. And primarily, the issue is developing a clear line of sight with other fellow New Yorkers as she travels in public spaces. So basically, as she's traveling within public spaces, how do we develop something where, she can be more seen by the people that are just, walking in the streets. But alternatively to Susan, the team in Adaptive already developed a first prototype that had a sliding rod that you would manually pull up, and then there was LEDs that you would just basically switch on. But then they reached out to Smart with basically taking the experience that Tamara has, and then also the prototype, and then thinking about how you could develop a version 2 of this that might be a little bit more automated. And they had some ideas themselves, and so. We got together and thought about what that project could be. And then lastly, because many of Adaptive's projects are open source, we thought about, how could we possibly do the same? And so given those current parameters in the initial prototype, Smart went to work. We wanted to develop a few different things. First is we wanted to develop something that was easy to use. The charge was automated, and the way that also the lighthouse itself went up and down was automated as well. And so when the lighthouse went up, the LEDs would turn on, and then when you hit the button again, the tower would then come back down, and everything would basically turn into a sleep state until it was turned back on for battery reasons. The second was we built a telescoping mechanism similar to a car antenna for the system to go up and down. And then we also fabricated all of the parts outside of the engine, of course, on a 3D printer, so that if anyone wanted to be able to replicate the designs, we could open source those pieces so that they could basically be 3D printed anywhere. And so this is actually the first prototype that we shown, and this is Tamara actually using it for the first time. So the control systems are actually very simple. It goes up, it goes down. There's one button to go up and there's one button to go down. The lights themselves turn on automatically at the top and they rest at the bottom. And we gave this prototype to Tamara to try out and then give us feedback about how it worked. And then from there, we continually iterated on what would be a version 2 of this. And then also when we're thinking about how this could be an actual product, what are the things that we might want to change? And so from there, we started thinking about what would this actually look like from a real product standpoint. Next slide, then. And so this is the next phase of the project. We're heading to finalizing the engineering and redefining the designs with the hope of eventually make this device open source. Users around the world will be able to download and maybe build their own lighthouse devices. I believe Adaptive Design is on the call and they actually have never seen the designs before. So this will be sort of their first time to actually see where we're kind of like potentially thinking about this going. Next slide. Oh no, previous slide, sorry. There we go. However, the goal and the immediate challenge we face is the customization and installation. With each user having different needs for us and the requirements for the chair installation, we're evolving the design for the device. What was developed for one person through inclusive design can be transformed into a universal solution through modular variations. And if you think about it on the next slide, there's obviously a lot of different chairs that are there. And so while we kind of designed this first prototype specifically to Tamara, so that we could focus in primarily on the experience and how she would interact with it. Now we're thinking about, okay, how do we take that one prototype and design it out to have multiple different attachments, or, while the base itself is centralized, maybe there's different ways to fasten it. And so we're starting to iterate on how we might be able to do those things. And then additionally, not only are we thinking about how we want to do it from a different chair perspective, but we also want to create this ability for people to be able to build their own lighthouses based on their own personalities. And so we have a BB-8 one, we have a Disney one, and then we have another creative, more colorful one that we're thinking that, hopefully when this whole entire project is open source, that people can kind of create their own lighthouses based on their personality and also the needs of their own chair. So we're super excited about this project and where it's actually going and the partnership that we have with Adaptive. And yeah, so those are the two projects. Thank you. You're muted, Dan.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, John. So we're going to keep moving things along. We're now moving into the medium-sized product, and we're going to be kicking it over to Andrew.
Thank you. Whoops. There we go. Is that full screen? Awesome. Thanks, everyone. My name is Andrew Scheer, founder and CEO of Farmshelf. When looking at a design challenge I had of wanting to grow my own food while living in San Francisco, I thought, it's a great idea. Let's start a hardware company. Said no one ever that has done hardware before. Sorry, it's a Monday, so my jokes are abnormally bad, but Farmshelf was really started with a simple purpose, to make it possible for everyone to go to food where they live, work, and eat. After I experienced that pain point and started looking around and thinking, can this technology advancement in other areas really help solve this problem, not just for me, but in a variety of, for a variety of users, and kind of thinking about these different technology pieces as Lego blocks. This is a little bit just about the problem. When we kind of look at it, it's mind blowing, to me at least, that about 50% of produce globally is wasted due to transit, spoilage before you're able to consume it. And then when looking in the US at all these plastic clamshells, only about 9% of them get recycled. And the stuff that we get does not taste that good compared to what is possible. I tried to grow my own food. It was very tough. And living in a city, it's like, and experiencing that pain point and thinking about others that would want to do the same thing, set out to really build those different solutions in a way that could help people grow, where they live, work, and eat, to bring food in a way that wasn't just about, nutrition, but also about experience and about connection to our food, because we're really searching for that in so many ways. Now we're going to go through the slides that are really old and don't look that pretty. But when we look at ourselves in the grand scheme of things, it's really a lot of the technical challenges of like where your food's grown comes down to like land, labor, logistics. But then when trying to automate it and do it yourself and make that cost effective, so many challenges arise. And so when it came to really focusing on designing for the user, it was testing and building things that didn't necessarily look the prettiest, but getting them out there and getting first contact with the customer. I think as someone that personally loved building things growing up, a rock climbing wall that could collapse from my landlord, or collapse to hide from our landlord, and custom snow skis, you want to build things and kind of get them to that perfect level, but really first contact with the customer, and whether that's tasting the produce or them even playing with a UX prototype is just so important. To the point where we actually started off originally designing for an individual home user, and that's not the route we ended up going. This was the first prototype back in 2016, which was just a simple device that we wanted to make sure that we can make the technology work, but also what we could imagine the user experience being like after growing a few plant cycles. But quickly realizing that for the type of experience that we wanted to deliver of, great tasting, cost-effective food day in and day out, that we didn't have the funding or the capability. And in some ways, the market wasn't even ready for us to attack kind of what our initial user we thought was. It wasn't someone at home. It was then looking at other ways that products had developed over time, such as Keurig, which started off in office buildings and hotels before ever getting to the point where it was ready to go into your home. Refining the brand, the experience, the UX, and getting learnings from those units out in the field. And so we built a larger system that was meant for restaurants, corporate cafeterias, and hotels, and then learned from mistakes of how not to move those. And then made other systems to test different engineering principles and aspects of the system, make sure that the experience that we really wanted to deliver was possible. And then launching in small batches and then listening as intently as we could, not just to the user, but to the people walking by and how they thought it worked or what their big questions were. With these two systems being launched about the same time in Grand Central Station, where we were able to sit and watch and just observe how people passed by them, what level the nose prints were on. You had the adult nose prints up against the glass and then the kid nose prints. One of the interesting questions that we didn't expect being asked when restaurants started using these is, oh, well, is this food, like, what do you guys do with this produce? Thinking, oh, it should be straightforward. If it's grown in the restaurant, they're probably going to use it there. But no, like we had to add signs and really think about the storytelling once the produce was grown of how it made it into a meal. That our job wasn't done once it was just time for harvest. And so sitting there and really through these prototypes, understanding the different stakeholders is something that it was a great experience to learn with a product like this. And by launching with these B2B customers, we really got to learn alongside them in a way that was scalable without getting blasted by PR. If you launch a consumer product yes, you're going to have your test group, but if something goes wrong when you're, say, a few hundred units and it's a normal customer, not a beta tester, they're going to blast you on social media instead of really entering into a conversation often about kind of ways you're trying to improve the product. So it's really about, whether it is consumer or B2B, inviting the customer into the process. And so when we launched our first product, our real first scaled version of this product in 2019, it was really focusing in on what are those things that our clients were really excited about for themselves and the reason they purchased it, as well as the story that they were telling. And flavor was the thing that came up first. Nutrition, to be honest, was something they thought was interesting and was a nice correlation between flavor, but not actually why that's not why they bought it. They wanted the flavor, they wanted the story, and they wanted this thing that was, show me, don't tell me, which is such a great way to be able to experience food. And with that, it was then, okay, how do we enable kind of those key aspects of what they value most about the experience, and then the background work that they have to do. And so trying to break it down into these weekly tasks and create these rhythms, reading books like Power of Habit and other things, and trying to really learn from other industries when you're launching a kind of a new experience and a new idea, shadowing them in their job, sitting down and talking with people who'd worked their way up through different levels of a restaurant, and what, their favorite parts of the job were and their least favorite parts were. These were all processes in a messy, less organized way. Unfortunately, we did not have smart design on the team of bringing this product to market, where we then not only were able to kind of get that initial experience, but then start experimenting with the other kind of levers, if you will, that we'd left open. Different monitoring capabilities that we built into the system that we knew, let's build in the capabilities and then we can experiment quickly later. Notifications on the screen. If they don't pay attention to the notification on the screen, you can control the lights of the entire unit. So you can literally make the entire unit a flashing orb as long as it's outside of restaurant hours. Like all these little things, and inviting customers into this process was how we kind of went about that design process to build something that customers ended up loving. And then launching and really obsessing over customers. You always have to be chatting with them, building relationships with them, not just about the problems or the joys they have with your product, but in their job in general, to understand the context with which they're looking at your product. We even had our plant scientist, and sorry, I'm talking a little fast, volunteer to go wash dishes at a Michelin star restaurant for a night, because he just wanted to be in the back and see how the restaurant worked and flowed, and be in that alongside the people that were using the unit and what their other parts of their day-to-day were, to see if there's ways that we could say, the way that you're doing this here, or that this is messaged around kind of the process of, dishes and plates and the plating of a dish before it goes out, is the way that we can build this into the way we communicate the user experience with Farmshelf. And then when it came to having the tools to be able to really listen and respond with a hardware company to these different inputs, it's about building flexibility in early on, really thinking about your items as modules and understanding how do I make it so that I can go between innovation cycles, from idea to I get to test it in the field or implement it in the actual physical product quickly. And we did that by breaking these systems up into kind of these various Lego blocks, so that it cost us less to go from one idea to the next, to the point where we even had systems that were originally meant for restaurants that education providers reached out to us about, and we were able to make the app available in a way where kids could play with different lighting recipes and other aspects that wasn't what the system was designed to do. Typically, the system was grow the best tasting plants possible, not, I wonder what happens if I pull out all of the red light spectrum and create this, head of lettuce that's super bitter. Typically, that wasn't our goal. But it was interesting to see how by leaving those levers open and listening to these customers and letting them experiment and play, we were able to get that feedback and really build this ecosystem of Lego blocks and customers that are crucial to any product development process, and have gone about and have been crucial as we look towards kind of this next generation product that solves problems that we couldn't solve with those levers that we left available in the last product. And one of the biggest learnings that we've had in the Farmshelf product development process has just been the progression and the sequencing, going from a commercial user to a luxury early adopter to a mass consumer. And in some ways, I think there's an ethical imperative to, use kind of these early adopters to cover a lot of the research and development costs so that you can strive in a way to make these technologies available to people, whose lives would be greatly improved by them, but not necessarily have to depend on nonprofit investment or dollars. Though, that doesn't mean I'm against it. And I think that's a great area. It's just, how do you expand this as fast as possible in a way that really solves problems for the people that want it the most? And I think that sometimes that's through methods like kind of this adoption model. And adoption models, you look back at people shipping ice in the 1800s, when we thought about changing industries and changing mindsets around things. And this idea that we'd gone from shipping things thousands of miles to all of a sudden centralized cold storage. And then what leaps needed to happen to go from centralized cold storage to the refrigerator, and kind of where can you steal insights along the way? A favorite story I have is when Coke was launching in a country that I'm not going to quote it right now because I'm not 100% sure on it, but basically Coke was launching into a country that they'd never been in before in the 90s, I believe it was, and they hadn't launched in a new country in decades. And so they went back to some of their original Coca-Cola campaigns in the US to see what value propositions and what items that people really connected with, and what even marketing tactics of, buy one, give one, or putting the price on the can, back then bottle, to ensure, that it really got adoption in a market at the price and the value prop and the understanding that they wanted. And so, we really think about them as Lego blocks so that we can enable all these various concepts and then experiment and let our users do a lot of the play that comes into, utilizing this technology in unique ways. And I think with that, we are now going on to what it looks like to do even more insane and amazing design with living, growing things, with the incredible neighbor of Terraform.
Awesome. Thank you. That was great, Andrew. Great. So we're now moving into the last presentation of the day, which is the large category. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Maria Ayalova, co-founder of Terraform.
Hello, everyone. And today I'm going to tell you about Design with Life, which is the title of our latest book that will be launched later this week at the Venice Biennale. So Terraform One is a nonprofit architecture and urban design research group, and we endeavor to combat extinction of all species, including humans, through our pioneering active design, So our mission is design against extinction. And today I want to tell you about living buildings. This is the Monarch Sanctuary. It's a proposed development in Nolita, a neighborhood of Manhattan, and it will house people and these guys, the Monarch Butterflies. They are native to New York City, and unfortunately, they're going extinct. The monarch butterflies migrate every year from all over North America to this very specific meadow in Mexico. And unfortunately, many of them don't make it because of lost habitat due to climate change and pollution from industrial farming. So our proposal is to house a vertical meadow within a double skin facade of a commercial building that will support all stages of life of monarch butterflies. So we're taking this approach of creating a porous building, again, supporting humans, but also butterflies, plants, and algae. And this is a very different thinking, going against kind of the current idea that in COVID and post-COVID world, we have to create these sterile buildings. And in fact, new research shows that by doing that, we are causing a lot of what it's called the first world diseases, including asthma and autism, by creating sterile environment and bringing children up in this sterile environment. So what we are proposing is the opposite, creating this control exchange and creating a new microbiome inside the building that matches the best quality of that meadow in Mexico. So in a way, we're bringing the habitat for the butterflies inside the facade of the building, but also making it part of the building system. And we are bringing the plants that feed the butterflies, but also different species that have the ability to purify the air. And to demonstrate that, we built a full-scale prototype at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Museum of Design, where we were invited to be part of the 2019 Nature Triennial. So here we demonstrated how this facade can really provide the optimum qualities for the life, to support the life of these butterflies. And by the time they reach maturity, they are released in the air and they can resume their natural pattern going back to Mexico. And while we don't think in this one building we'll be able to repopulate all the kind of the lost population, but it demonstrates the possibility of what will be possible in the future of incorporating living systems to be part of the building systems. And I would like to define biodesign as this pioneering field of design that incorporates living organism as an essential component, enhancing the function of the finished work. And it all started with this very early project called the Fab Tree Hub, or the Fabular tree habitat, with the idea that you can grow a building out of living trees by bleaching them together and then filling in other plants to create a whole living house without cutting any trees. It's a slow process. In the New York climate, will take anywhere between 7 to 10 years. So we did a lot of experiments. These willow cuttings grew over the course of the summer on a rooftop in Brooklyn. But for people who didn't want to wait, we created a small one single room cabin where you can get from us a scaffolding created only from 3 sheets of marine plywood, having only 2 distinct parts, assemble it together, and then grow trees, soft trees and vines around it. And then we adapted that system for interior use, again, to purify interior air. These are wetland grass species that have the ability to clean the air using the principles of phytoremediation. And here we're supporting them through, there is a cistern in the bottom that circulates nutrients. And once these wetland grasses grow to the full extent, they can serve as this filter of interior air. Originally, this project was developed for Shanghai. We're working with Shanghai Tech, but now obviously in a post-COVID world, we are thinking that there will be many more applications. And finally, I'd like to leave you with our most recent project. This is the Bio Informatic Digester, and we just installed it this year on Earth Day in Camden, New Jersey. This was created with a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies, and they asked the city of Camden to designate, there were 6 sites that were used for illegal dumping. And with creating these installations for 6 months, the goal is to educate the public about the possibilities. So the Bio Informatic Digester provides kind of a clock using all these different materials and the rate of biodegradation. And what you see in the cube here is a place where people can dispose of their styrofoam waste. Styrofoam left by itself would take over 1,000 years to biodegrade. However, here we're using mealworms, the ability to digest styrofoam and turn it into frack that becomes basically compost. And within 6 months, they will go through their metamorphosis and turn into beetles. So by doing that, we again want to demonstrate the possibility of the future of design, where we'll be able to solve some of the toughest problems of how to deal with waste, including styrofoam. So thank you. And please come visit us at New Lab at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Our doors are always open, and we love sharing our work.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, that wraps up the presentation portion of today. Thank you to all the presenters for showing some really great inspirational and aspirational projects. Again, the goal of today was to really kind of showcase the scale of what a product can be. And I really feel like we've demonstrated that there's a lot of opportunities to innovate and ways to make the world a better place in different scales and in different applications. So we're going to move over now to just to open up as a conversation. Anyone who's listening and tuning in today, please feel free to send us some questions below for the panel. We'd love to hear from you and answer any questions you guys have on your mind. Tiffany, I think you're going to kick things off with the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again to the panelists. It's always nice because we're all very busy at the Yard, so we don't always get to stop and talk about the work that we're doing. So it's nice to have this chance. And so the question I wanted to ask you guys to talk a little about is, you guys obviously know that we have a very sort of diverse and interesting community of tenants at the Yard. And I'd love to hear from you about how that informs your approach to your work and any partnerships or collaborations that may have resulted in your time here at the Yard.
Building physical things is difficult. And I think being around other people building physical things and just getting to talk about it, or, hey, there's a set designer, down on the first floor, or have you talked to these guys over at Bednark and what they're up to? It's always super interesting. And then with New Lab, which is part of the Navy Yard, just being able to connect with other people building hardware items, because you get to talk about sourcing, design challenges, prototyping, and sometimes even someone's old prototype has parts that you can use for your future prototype. And so I think those are fun ways in that this community and where it's at have been really helpful for us. But yeah.
And for us, it has been very important to tap into everyone who is both at New Lab and through the whole Yard. And I truly believe innovation doesn't happen in isolation. It needs these shared spaces, but also it needs access to machines, technologies, and people. And as Andrew said, it was been very important to us to exchange ideas, but also to be able to build some of these big prototypes outdoors, and go and talk to some of our neighbors at the Navy Yard, use their warehouse. And that type of camaraderie doesn't happen every day. So the Navy Yard is a unique place that allows for this daily innovation.
We're brand new, but I think that creativity and diversity kind of go hand in hand when you think about the two of them together. And so when you think about a lot of creative companies, whether they're service companies or they're startups or they're big, small hardware, software, however you kind of think about it, the more that you can talk to people that solve problems in unique ways, the more that you might think about a problem that you're trying to solve in a different way. And so, I come primarily from a software background, but talking to hardware engineers or ecological designers or scientists, it's interesting to see how similar our problems are, but how differently we approach them. And so the more that we get to learn, the more we become better at the things that we do. So all you have to do is kind of create that greenhouse and just and see how what kind of like sprouts out from it.
Awesome. And, as like a follow-up to that, I actually want to take a question from one of the listeners. It's a good kind of build off of that. And this is coming from, and I hope I'm saying your last name right, Lara Ozansoy. The question is, do you think in 2021, working with people from other disciplines, such as scientists, engineers, psychiatrists in a team, is as common as you thought it'd be? So, everyone here comes from really different, professional backgrounds, and seeing the type of diverse teams you guys put together, maybe you guys can talk a little bit about that. One, to answer her question, is that what you expected, or, where is your head on that, and how teams are built and how diverse they are, and how can you relate to that with your individual projects and workflows?
I could take that first. I think that I come from a predominantly different background, but as a software engineer, you were typically building things that were visually, from the web, and then from the web it became mobile. Obviously, there are connected things that have been built like kiosks all along, but there definitely has been a shift, especially with the Internet of Things over the last 10 years, where all of a sudden people are building things with technology that are really starting to solve very niche problems that technology might have not been used beforehand. And so if, as an example, we worked on the Gatorade Sweat Patch project, and a lot of that had to work with scientists all over the world. I would not envision myself doing that type of work because everything was so web or mobile driven for so long. But it seems like we're moving in a place where there's going to be more collaboration within those verticals, and I'm kind of excited to see how technology plays a role with how we design out all sorts of different services that that go deeper and deeper within these things to solve ecological problems and big world problems. So I think that it's even going to get even better over time.
Yeah, I can echo what John said. And I think in 2021, we're seeing even more silos being broken. And I think in this post-COVID moment where we are kind of both reckoning and reinventing what we do, we are now acutely aware of the fact that some of these problems that we're facing are so big, one single discipline cannot solve them. And I can speak about the built environment, and I think we are now seeing collaborations that didn't exist before, and also kind of a true collaborations where everybody is at the table from day one, co-creating together. You're not brought in just as an expert to give your opinion, but you're there as a co-creator, and I believe that will continue, that way of working will continue to grow and flourish.
For myself, prior to this, I worked in that kind of the social media space at Pinterest and Twitter, and coming over to, going from sales and marketing to coming over to getting to work with plant scientists and mechanical engineers and designers, I guess I was surprised at how still like nascent, I feel, some collaboration tools across disciplines are. Even some of the CAD programs, it blows my mind how hard it is to get input from other teams without having to have 5 different licensees. And I get some of those are business constraints, but I guess there's also this aspect of it's just with the plant science aspect and pulling that in. We've seen that a lot of other companies, like the level at which they really put even the plants in kind of a first class, role at the company. I think that's part of the cross-disciplinary approach that I've been surprised at, is that often it's just so dominated by like one party or another at so many companies. And it's just that equality of voice from different teams that is so hard to find, I feel still, when bringing in those cross-disciplinary teams. I mean, historically, it's been like you have sales-heavy companies or product-heavy companies and engineering-heavy companies, but you add plant science to that, mechanical engineering, manufacturing, like you have all these people collaborating. How do you really create those ideal conditions to get the right people might be in the room, but how do you have the right conversation? Seems to be an area that just still is always going to need work, and where I'm still learning a ton.
Awesome. Thanks. No, those are great answers. I mean, it's definitely, I mean, I can definitely attest to all that as well. It's interesting to see how teams have grown, and Maria, I think you said it also really well, that it's like almost becoming a normal standard. This idea of like, it's not just about getting experts in, but just having diverse opinions from the beginning is such a key part of that creative process. Just pivoting a little bit, just to keep the conversation going. Something I kind of wanted to talk about, and this is also kind of like a question I have for you guys is, how do we democratize design in a way that you guys are working on it? So, I feel like when you, as a designer, as a creative, looking back to when I was a student, going to the Cooper Hewitt, being a New Yorker, like you'd see all these amazing projects and you'd see all these incredible, ambitious ideas. And, sometimes they'd be installed, sometimes they'd be for sale. But how do we take, the stuff that you guys are working on and make it available to more people? And what are some of the challenges you guys face with scale and just getting good design into the hands of more people?
Do you mean like democratizing design is getting more people involved in the design process? Or how do you get design products out there, like to more people?
I mean, however you want to answer it, but it was more of the second one. So this idea of like, Andrew, you had kind of talked about the idea of you couldn't originally get into the idea of consumers' hands. So you went more of corporate, larger installations, institutions and things like that. What are the challenges you faced? Like maybe you can go deeper on that into getting those products into users' hands. And Maria, for example, those architecture, it's so incredible and so aspirational. But how does that become something that's more normal and more day to day, where a general consumer can start to benefit from all the innovations you're creating?
NYSERDA and Second Muse have done this program that is about helping kind of companies with prototyping and manufacturing in the physical space, that I think is a great start in that direction of making it easier to get things into people's hands. And I think the interesting evolution of that is, like as a startup founder, like one of the things that sometimes you'll meet people that have an idea and they're like, oh, but I can't tell you what my idea is, even though it's in a totally different like industry, because they're afraid to steal it. And you're like, I can barely handle what I have going on right now. Like your idea is your idea. But can I help? And so I think it's like these like these professional, like how do you get kind of people that are experts in their field that want to kind of change up, that have, that 10% maybe of their time where they want to like work on something different that still utilizes that same skill set that they're awesome at, where them jumping in and brainstorming or helping on one little item would be a joy to them and so helpful and save maybe months to a startup. How do you align those things? Not only from a need and a like supply and a demand perspective of I need this, here's the person that can do that, but also I think from an incentive alignment perspective. I think there's a unique opportunity to do that in New York, just given the way the city's kind of culture seems to work, having moved here from San Francisco. And I don't know what the answer is to it though. I mean, the attempt that startups have done have like been advisors and like equity grants, but that often is so formal and in such a way that it makes it really risky to experiment sometimes.
Well, Terraform One, we've taken the approach of open network. In fact, one stands for ONE, Open Network Ecology. So, because as a nonprofit, we freely share all our designs, but we also help start many different companies, and there are kind of different level of engagement. Let's say if you want one of these Fab Tree Hubs, a small bungalow, you can buy it from us for a lot of money, but you can also download the design, and if you have access to a CNC machine, you can fabricate it yourself. So, and anywhere in between, getting it in a flat pack from us and then growing it yourself. So it kind of by kind of changing that kind of the from just getting the final product to giving options to be involved in the process of assembling it or fabricating it. We think that could change. I mean, so we don't have to ship things across the globe where, we can just send the files and somebody can fabricate it there. And also of kind of allowing, because a lot of researchers and fellows and collaborators come through us, allowing them to then take ownership of something we co-developed and then grow it into a single company. So by kind of allowing this very open collaboration, freely exchange ideas, but also understanding that it is important to bring it to market, what Andrew is doing with Farmshelf. So empowering these inventors to take certain designs and then grow them into a company.
I think one of the reasons why I was so gravitated to being a software engineer is just the community within software engineering on how everyone props each other one up within their own communities. And so, a lot of the things that are being built, like with Ruby on Rails and with Node.js, a lot of the code that's out there is usually coded by someone else that someone can just grab and then use themselves. And so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel, or maybe, they're trying to design, a simple prototype of their idea of something they want to do creative, but they might not have the coding chops to do it. And so they can kind of like pull these things together and at least be able to articulate it in some sort of way. And now you're starting to see it. I mean, it's harder to do that from like a hardware or physical standpoint because of the expertise that you would just need to know to do it. And that's why I was always so impressed with Adaptive when we first met them, was that like a lot of things they do is open source, where, they design these things. And even if it's designed with, say, cardboard, they then would send those designs out so that if someone was experiencing, or they had experienced a similar disability, they had something there that they can kind of like build themselves. And so it seems like that there are more and more products out there and frameworks out there that are just going to continue this along, whether it's with like 3D printing or it's with websites like Squarespace, where it used to be that like you would you'd want to build a website and you need to know a web designer. And then all of a sudden that would take like a whole 6-month process to do. Well, now, every like e-commerce is now simple. And so it just seems like this stuff is going to get more and more easy to do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The good thing is that like we're removing some of the barriers to entry, and the people that have really creative ideas can be brought up for the forefront to kind of like build those things using some of these tools.
I mean, I feel like the website analogy comes up so often because it's true. I look back at the class, trying to learn Dreamweaver and how it never really took me anywhere. And now Squarespace is just this amazing turnkey solution that really has just given everyone the power to have a website and open up a business online. I think those are all really great examples. Really cool stuff. Maybe, one last question as relates to this is like understanding just, a little bit more detail, like some of the challenges that you guys have faced with these initiatives. Andrew, you showed literally it's your device. You tried moving it and it fell apart and crumbled.
We didn't have a mechanical engineer. I got a concussion. It fell on my head. I gave a great presentation afterwards, though.
I think, again, you guys are doing really, really ambitious work. which is really exciting. And, for people who are listening today, who want to maybe follow in these footsteps, to maybe launch their own company, to get into open source, or really to just try ambitious new forms of design and architecture, what are some of the challenges you faced to have gotten to where you are today, and some advice you could offer to everyone listening today?
Maria, do you want to kick off? Or?
Sure. Well, for us, when we first started, it was we wanted to be really taken seriously, that we are part of the profession, and our work is what it's advancing the future of the profession. And we were often kind of excluded from being at the table because people didn't take us seriously, and then we had to exhibit as artists in galleries and museums in order to get the word out. And before the American Institute of Architects start paying attention, and it's okay to say this, but it was certain crisis that really brought us to the forefront in design. And we have been doing designs of protecting the shores of New York City. We had this speculative project at the Brooklyn Navy Yard before we moved there, of dealing with rising sea levels, and then Sandy happened, and then people start looking at our design and saying, well, this is something we need to be serious about. And then we won a lot of awards. And so it was kind of, how do you, when you are really thinking further in the future, win that place on the table, how are you being taken seriously? And then fast forward to today, where we're at the table, but how do we find this inspired developers who are now willing to invest in these projects?
If you're thinking of starting your own thing, I would say just spend time reading books in advance of that. I mean, 0 to 1 is a good one because I just think it's an interesting way to think about like startup ideas. There's so many blogs out there that are great, but Sequoia has a great blog that just talks about the things that you have to really think about when like planning a business and building an enduring company, just because you're signing up for a lot. And so after reading about what it's going to take, just make sure that you're obsessed with what you're going to go build, because it's definitely not going to go the way that you planned is what I hear from 99% of people. And then once you've like committed and got to that point where you're like, I just want to do this so badly. It's, I think, not being afraid to share the idea, and that most of the time people really want to hold it back, and self-included, because they're afraid that like if they share it with someone else is going to copy it. And that's very, very rarely the right strategy or a beneficial thing for you to do, because there are smart, brilliant people around you, and most people like to help others. And so asking for feedback, critical feedback, and not, I used to tell investors, like, we're not here to play camp startup, tell me exactly what you think. Like, you don't need to sugarcoat it. Like, we want to build something that works, that solves a problem. Like, just like, let us know. And then right after that, think about your personal support system, and designing your life for support, mental, nutritional, exercise. This is probably like a broken record at this point, because we've all talked about self-care this last year more than normal. But, if you don't think about that early on, about taking care of your emotional and social, like kind of your well-being in general, and that of the people in your life, it's going to suck for them. It's going to suck for you. And you're going to miss all the fun parts along the way that are getting to live 5 years of normal life in 1 year, because of how many different hats you have to wear when you're taking over ideas or new projects. So get excited about that. But also just like, you have to really think about, what does it look like to hold this idea well? I think about, and so the way to land that is maybe this idea of like firm convictions actively held. Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the things that Andrew said, especially around the sharing. It's so rare when someone's going to especially in your own network, that's just going to take your idea and run with it. But one thing that I would definitely say, and I've said a lot to some new startups, is that one, stop thinking and building, because you can talk about it for as long as you want, but once you start building it, then all of a sudden things will start happening. So that's one. And then the second one is, don't worry about scale. I mean, worry the fact that 3 people can use it, but don't worry about the fact that you need 1 million people to use it. Often people they start to compare themselves to companies that are publicly traded companies that have been around for 15 years. And they say, well, we're opening up a direct competition with them. Well, the actuality is you're really trying to prove out an idea, and you could spend 80% of your budget building something out to scale when you're really just trying to prove out if this is something that somebody wants or it's actually solving a problem. And so if you're getting to a point where you're developing so much growth that the platform that you built is starting to fall over, then that's a different problem, and that is a good problem to have. And so if you can find a framework that you can stand on, and it gets you 80% there, and not the full 100%, but it will cost you 20% of the budget, then do that, because that's going to actually save you a lot of time and money in the long run.
At Twitter, every time I was there for a few years, starting in 2013, every time someone scored during the World Cup, the platform crashed. And they had that problem where they had talked to this company that had basically built the infrastructure for a social network with twice as many people as Twitter had, but had no users. And it's you're going to have problems no matter what. Just pick the ones that are the ones that are the hardest and most critical to seeing if the idea is even worth building and spending 10 years of your life on. If you're lucky, it'll fail in 2 years. If you're not, it'll fail in 6. If you're not, then it will be, if you're really lucky, then it will work. But it's a good journey, and very few people I've talked to have regretted starting something.
Awesome. Well, listen, this has been really great. I know we're over time, so I really appreciate everyone here for, giving a great presentation and answering some great questions. I thought it was a really fun discussion. So just, thank you again to Maria, to Andrew, to John, to the Brooklyn Navy Yard, to New York City by Design. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks to all the viewers and listeners. Let me quickly do one more thing. We have Smart Design, we're continuing down this path, and we're going to continue to have some great events. So please join us for our next Virtual Smart Design event, Closing the Loop, How Systems Enable the Circular Economy. You can RSVP at the link there, and we've also just submitted one on the chat window. I believe this one is going to be held in June 22nd. So please join us for that as well. Thank you again to the panelists and for everyone who joined today.
Thanks, Smart Design team. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.